Hi, it's a pleasure to have you here. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. I woke up that morning full of hope, humming a soft tune as the sunlight streamed through my bedroom window. I felt excited to start a new project at work, determined to surprise my team with my ideas. As I walked into the kitchen, the familiar smell of fresh coffee wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. I reached for my favorite mug, the one with a small crack I refused to throw away because it reminded me of better times. That's when I noticed a folded piece of paper on the counter, perfectly placed by the fruit bowl where he knew I'd find it. Confused, I picked it up, already sensing something was wrong as a chill ran down my spine. My hand started to tremble before I even unfolded it, the silence of the room growing heavier with every heartbeat. My mind screamed at me to throw it away, to pretend I hadn't seen it, but I couldn't stop myself from reading the first words that would change everything. I stood frozen, the morning light now feeling harsh and cold on my skin, like it was mocking my naive optimism. The tick of the kitchen clock echoed louder and louder, drowning out every other sound as I felt the floor slipping beneath me. I clutched the note as if it could anchor me, but its weight was only pulling me deeper into a nightmare I never imagined. The smell of coffee turned bitter, my breakfast untouched on the table like a symbol of the life that was slipping through my fingers. My reflection in the microwave's black glass looked unfamiliar, eyes wide with disbelief and a mouth twisted in silent horror. Memories of our shared mornings rushed back, each one now tainted by the knowledge of what he had done. I wished I could rewind time just a few minutes, to the blissful ignorance of moments ago. But the note was real, and there was no going back. His handwriting was unmistakable, every curve of each letter a cruel reminder of the man I once loved. The message was short, devastating in its simplicity: "I'm gone, your life is boring. I took everything. And the house is already sold. Enjoy what's left." My eyes scanned the words over and over, hoping I had misread them, but the meaning only grew clearer, sharper, like a blade carving into my chest. I sank into the nearest chair as my legs refused to support me, the paper crumpling in my shaking hand. The walls of the kitchen seemed to close in, each familiar photo and decoration now a mockery of the happy life I thought I had. My breathing grew ragged, my heart pounding so violently it felt like it might burst through my ribs. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but only a strangled sob escaped my lips. I felt my world crack open, the foundation of my life crumbling in an instant. How could someone I trusted so completely turn on me with such calculated cruelty? Every memory we had built together felt poisoned by his betrayal. Our wedding photos on the fridge became twisted snapshots of a lie, each smile hiding a secret he had been waiting to unleash. My mind raced with questions, each one more painful than the last. When did he start planning this? Was any of it real? I realized I was gripping the note so hard my knuckles were white, the paper already torn at the edges from the force of my despair. The realization hit me like a punch: the man I thought was my partner, my confidant, had not only abandoned me but tried to erase me entirely. The silence in the kitchen grew deafening, amplifying every small sound until the ticking clock felt like a hammer pounding in my skull. I looked around at the room we had shared countless breakfasts in, now a tomb of broken promises. Each object seemed to whisper betrayal: the chair where he used to kiss my cheek, the stove where we cooked dinners that ended in laughter, the mugs we collected from our travels. I wrapped my arms around myself, desperate for warmth, but the cold emptiness inside me was spreading like a poison. My eyes darted from corner to corner as if he might suddenly appear and tell me it was all a cruel joke. But the house remained painfully still, each second of quiet slicing deeper than any shout could. Memories of our life together assaulted me in flashes: the vacations where he held my hand on sandy beaches, the nights we stayed up talking about our dreams, the birthdays he promised we'd celebrate forever. I remembered how he used to make me coffee just the way I liked it, smiling as if nothing could ever go wrong. How could those moments dissolve into this heartless betrayal? My chest ached as if my heart was physically tearing apart, every breath shallow and ragged. I wondered if my neighbors could hear my silent agony through the walls, if the world outside continued to spin while mine had come to a violent stop. I closed my eyes, wishing the silence would swallow me whole so I wouldn't have to face the reality he left behind. As the crushing weight of betrayal settled in, a fierce anger began to rise in my chest, burning hotter with every memory of his smug face. How dare he call my life boring when I was the one who kept our home warm, our bills paid, and our dreams alive? The audacity of his words ignited a storm inside me, turning my grief into a sharp blade of rage. I stood up so suddenly my chair screeched against the floor, my hands curled into fists as I looked around at the house I had poured my soul into. He thought he could erase me with a few sentences on a scrap of paper, but I was done crying over someone so cowardly. My tears dried as determination took their place, the first spark of defiance flashing through the fog of my heartbreak. I stormed into the living room, each step fueled by memories of sacrifices he never saw or appreciated. Every time I stayed late at work to pay our debts, every weekend I canceled plans with friends so we could have time together, it all felt like a cruel joke now. The photos on the walls mocked me with our staged smiles, but I refused to let them break me any further. I tore one from its frame, letting the glass shatter on the floor, a symbol that I would no longer accept the lies. The house felt different now, charged with my fury instead of his absence. I promised myself I would reclaim everything he tried to steal, including my sense of worth. I walked to the kitchen counter where my phone lay blinking with unread messages from friends wondering if I was okay. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked it and opened our last conversation, his sweet words from days ago now exposed as empty manipulations. My fingers hovered above the keyboard as I fought the urge to send a stream of insults or desperate pleas. Instead, I typed a short, cold message, "I saw your note. Thanks for letting me know." I read it twice, ensuring not a hint of weakness could slip through, then pressed send with a sense of finality I had never felt before. My heart pounded, but there was a calm in my chest, like I had finally taken the first step to reclaiming my power. I set the phone down and waited, half expecting it to ring instantly with his excuses or threats, but the silence continued, thick and unbroken. Each second without a response strengthened my resolve, proving he wasn't as confident as he pretended to be. I imagined him reading my message, realizing I wasn't falling apart the way he hoped. I pictured his smug smile faltering as he realized I would not grovel or beg him to return. The kitchen felt like a battlefield I had just won with a single line of text. I knew the war was far from over, but for the first time since I found his note, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. The next step was clear in my mind, cutting through the swirling emotions like a beacon. I needed answers and protection, and only my lawyer could give me both. I grabbed the phone again, scrolling to his contact and hitting call before I could lose my nerve. My voice trembled as I explained everything, from the note to my fears about the house being sold without my consent. He listened patiently, his calm professionalism soothing me more than I expected, though I could hear a note of alarm in his voice when I mentioned the possibility of forged documents. He assured me he would start investigating immediately, promising to get back to me as soon as he found any information. Hanging up the phone, I felt a rush of adrenaline mingled with terror, knowing I had set something in motion I couldn't stop. The kitchen felt suffocating, so I paced the hallway, rehearsing what I would do if he came back to confront me. Every shadow seemed to shift with menace, but I refused to hide or run away. My lawyer's words echoed in my mind, "Stay calm, act quickly, don't let him get ahead of you." I checked the locks on every door and window, securing the house as if it were a fortress. I refused to let him sneak back in to steal anything else, least of all my peace of mind. 2 hours later, my phone rang with my lawyer's number flashing across the screen, and I answered it with a heart that felt like it might explode from anxiety. His voice was grave as he explained that he had found undeniable evidence. My husband had forged my signature on the documents to sell our house. The shock of the betrayal deepened, morphing into a searing fury that left me gasping for breath. I clenched the edge of the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white, the tiles cool under my sweating palms. How could someone I once trusted with my heart plan something so vile, something that could leave me homeless and destitute? My mind spun with images of him sitting in some dark corner, calmly practicing my signature as he plotted to steal my entire life. My lawyer reassured me that the sale would not go through once we presented the proof, but he also warned me that time was critical to stop any further damage. I felt the first stirrings of hope piercing through the dark cloud of despair as I realized he had made a crucial mistake. By forging my name, he had given me the weapon I needed to fight back. But there was no room for hesitation. I knew my husband could still try to move money or manipulate people into siding with him. My pulse pounded in my ears as I took a shaky breath and thanked my lawyer, grateful for his quick action and unwavering support. I promised him I would do everything on my end to protect what was mine. Hanging up, I felt my rage crystallize into determination. My lawyer's words echoed in my mind like a siren as I rushed to my bedroom, my hands flying across drawers and cabinets to find my purse. Every second felt like an hour, every tick of the clock a reminder that he could be draining our accounts while I stood frozen. I finally found my wallet and keys, my fingers fumbling in my desperation to move faster. As I stepped into the hallway, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, my eyes wild, hair disheveled, a woman I barely recognized staring back. But that woman wasn't broken, she was ready to fight for everything she had built. I wiped the tears from my face and squared my shoulders, refusing to let him see me defeated, even from afar. I dashed to my car, my mind racing with the steps my lawyer told me to take: go to the bank, freeze joint accounts, secure every penny before he could steal it. The drive felt endless as I wove through traffic, cursing every red light that slowed me down. The city around me seemed oblivious to my personal war, people laughing on sidewalks, cars honking with impatience, the world continuing as if nothing had happened. But for me, every breath felt like it could be my last chance to save myself from complete ruin. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly it left indentations on my palms. I repeated my lawyer's instructions like a mantra, determined not to forget a single detail when I reached the bank. My car skidded into the bank parking lot, the tires squealing as I slammed it into park and leapt out without bothering to lock the doors. I sprinted across the pavement, bursting through the glass doors and nearly colliding with a security guard who gave me a startled look. My chest heaved as I reached the counter, blurting out my request to freeze the joint accounts before my husband could empty them. The bank manager appeared within moments, his face shifting from polite professionalism to grave concern as I explained the forged documents and sudden betrayal. He ushered me into his office, and I felt the minutes ticking away like bombs as he tapped at his computer keyboard with practiced urgency. Every second felt like a countdown to disaster, and I gripped the arms of the chair so hard I worried I'd leave permanent marks. My mind flashed with images of my husband smirking as he transferred money with the push of a button, erasing years of work and sacrifice in an instant. But the manager's focused expression gave me a sliver of hope, his quick actions a lifeline pulling me back from the brink. He confirmed the freeze was in progress, his words slicing through my panic like a blessed knife. Relief and exhaustion crashed over me as I slumped in the chair, tears welling up but refusing to fall. I had made it in time, by minutes, but in time nonetheless. Inside the manager's office, I watched every keystroke with my heart hammering like a war drum, terrified something might go wrong at the last second. He assured me the freeze had taken effect, explaining that my husband would no longer have access to the joint accounts. The words felt like a shield wrapping around me, a fragile sense of safety after the chaos of the morning. I signed documents with shaking hands, forcing myself to stay calm and not let fear cloud my mind. The bank staff moved quickly, whispering updates as they confirmed that all my assets were secure, their efficiency a quiet but powerful reassurance. I almost collapsed from the rush of adrenaline fading, relief mingling with exhaustion in every trembling limb. When I stepped out of the bank's office, I felt eyes on me from customers waiting in line, curious or sympathetic as they caught a glimpse of my tear-streaked face. I didn't care what they thought, I had done what I needed to survive. The weight of the day settled heavily on my shoulders as I walked back to my car, the bright afternoon sun glaring down like an unfeeling spectator to my pain. I opened the door and sank into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel as if it were the only thing anchoring me to reality. My mind buzzed with thoughts of what he might do next, the danger far from over despite this small victory. But for the first time since the nightmare began, I knew he no longer held all the cards. As I drove home, every street seemed to blur together in a haze of exhaustion and relentless determination, my brain searching desperately for any advantage I could still find. That's when a memory surfaced like a spark in the dark, an old savings account I had opened years ago in my name only, one I had nearly forgotten existed. The thought made my heart stutter with cautious hope, a secret stash untouched by his greedy hands. I parked in front of my house, hurried inside, and rifled through old files in my bedroom closet, praying I hadn't imagined it. When I found the dusty folder with the bank's logo, I nearly sobbed with relief as I scanned the account details, confirming it was still active. The next morning, I went to the bank where the account was held, every step a battle against the fear that somehow he had discovered and emptied it before me. The teller looked surprised but kindly as I presented my ID and asked for the balance, her fingers clicking across her keyboard before she turned the screen toward me. The number displayed was modest, but to me it felt like a fortune, a lifeline he couldn't take away. I transferred the funds to a secure new account immediately, savoring the sense of control returning to my life. Walking out of that bank, I felt taller, stronger, the secret savings a small but powerful symbol that he hadn't thought of everything. He underestimated me, and that would be his greatest mistake. With the joint accounts frozen and my secret funds secured, I knew it was time to gather every piece of proof to expose what he had done. I pulled out old folders, opened locked cabinets, and spread documents across my dining table like a battlefield map. My eyes scanned bank statements, contracts, emails, anything that might show his lies, his forged signatures, or the sudden movements of money he couldn't explain. Each discovery was a stab of betrayal but also a weapon I could use to fight back. I took photos of everything, backed them up to multiple devices, determined to build a case so airtight he wouldn't find a crack to slither through. The quiet of the house was punctuated by the click of my phone camera, each shot a step closer to justice. I barely noticed the hours passing as I worked late into the night, the only light coming from the lamp over the table illuminating my scattered arsenal of evidence. My emotions swirled between rage, sorrow, and a grim sense of purpose that kept me moving even when fatigue clawed at my eyes. I pictured him smugly thinking I would sit in silence, too weak to retaliate, and the thought fueled my resolve like gasoline on a fire. Every paper I organized, every email I printed was another nail in the coffin of his twisted plan. When I finally paused, the table was covered with a mountain of proof, and I allowed myself a shaky breath. I was ready for whatever came next. As I searched every inch of our bedroom, determined not to overlook a single clue, I pulled back the clothes in the closet and noticed an unfamiliar bulge tucked into the darkest corner. My heart pounded as I knelt down and dragged out a suitcase I didn't recognize, the zipper already slightly open as if he had been ready to grab it at any moment. Inside, his favorite shirts were carefully folded next to passports, credit cards, and a stack of cash that made my stomach twist. It was clear he had been planning his escape for weeks, preparing a perfect exit while he smiled at me over dinner each night. Rage mixed with icy clarity as I realized he had been living a double life under my own roof. Each item I pulled from the suitcase felt like another slap, proof of his meticulous deceit. I spread the suitcase's contents across the bed, photographing everything, his tickets to another city, the burner phone he thought I'd never find, and the documents listing hotels he had already booked under fake names. My hands shook, but I forced myself to stay methodical, organizing each piece of evidence with a cold precision I never knew I possessed. The betrayal had stopped feeling like a wound and begun to feel like a mission. I would not allow his treachery to stay hidden in the shadows he thought were safe. By the time I zipped the suitcase shut, it felt like I was locking away the last remnants of who I thought he was. I placed it by the front door as a reminder, he couldn't run from the truth anymore. As I rummaged deeper through the suitcase, a thin slip of paper fell from a jacket pocket and fluttered to the floor, landing at my feet like a silent bomb. I bent down and picked it up, unfolding a hotel receipt dated only 3 days earlier, with a woman's name listed under the reservation. My vision swam as the letters burned themselves into my brain, a searing confirmation that his betrayal wasn't just financial, it was intimate, personal, devastating. He hadn't only abandoned me, he had given himself to someone else while I lay awake at night worrying about our future. My knees nearly buckled under the weight of the revelation, but I caught myself on the bedpost, refusing to collapse. The thought of him with another woman ignited a rage that felt hotter and more consuming than anything I had known. I imagined them laughing together, whispering secrets in hotel rooms while I fought to keep our lives afloat, and the image made bile rise in my throat. I took a photo of the receipt, zooming in on the date and name, determined to expose this affair as yet another weapon he had used to destroy me. My breath came in ragged gasps, but I forced myself to steady it, knowing that letting anger control me would only give him more power. I looked around the room, the place we once shared now feeling like a crime scene, and vowed that neither he nor his mistress would walk away unscathed. Clutching the hotel receipt in one hand, I grabbed my phone and dialed the number of the real estate agent handling the house sale, my voice shaking with equal parts rage and desperation when he answered. I introduced myself quickly, telling him I was the rightful owner of the house and demanding to know what was happening. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line before he hesitantly admitted he thought I was gravely ill and unable to sign papers. My husband had told him I was incapacitated, feeding him lies to make it seem like he had the authority to act alone. I felt my blood boil at the thought of him spinning such a vile story about me to strangers. Each word from the agent's mouth confirmed how thoroughly my husband had crafted his scheme. I asked the realtor for every detail, what documents had been presented, when meetings had occurred, who had witnessed the signatures. He described everything with growing horror in his voice, clearly realizing the seriousness of the fraud he had unknowingly facilitated. I took notes feverishly, determined to leave no stone unturned as I prepared to confront this betrayal in court. By the time I ended the call, the realtor promised his full cooperation and offered to testify if needed, his voice trembling with regret. I thanked him curtly, every ounce of my energy now focused on turning my husband's lies into the rope that would hang his plans. The truth was coming, and it would be unstoppable. With the realtor's confession echoing in my mind, I immediately called my lawyer and explained everything I had uncovered, my voice sharp with urgency. He wasted no time, filing an emergency injunction to halt the sale of the house before the transaction could be finalized. Every second felt like a tightrope walk over a pit of disaster, my breath catching each time the phone buzzed with updates from his office. Finally, just after noon, my lawyer called to confirm the court had approved the injunction, freezing all actions on the property. The buyers were furious, but the law was on my side now, and their anger was nothing compared to the storm raging inside me. I slumped against the kitchen wall, exhausted but electrified by the knowledge that I had stopped his plan in its tracks. The victory tasted bittersweet, the reality of what he'd almost succeeded in doing still gnawing at my heart like a relentless predator. My home no longer felt like a sanctuary, but I refused to let him turn it into a monument to his betrayal. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, reminding myself this space was mine, a place I had built with years of love and sacrifice. Each familiar object felt like a small reclaiming of power, a declaration that he would not erase my life so easily. I knew he would soon discover his scheme had collapsed, and I relished the thought of his shock when he realized I had fought back. For the first time, I allowed myself a fierce smile. My phone rang as I stood in the hallway, my husband's name flashing across the screen like a curse. I answered with a steady voice, determined not to let him hear the tremor of adrenaline still coursing through me. His tone was icy and demanding as he asked why the accounts were frozen and the house sale stopped, his arrogance dripping with entitlement. I took a slow breath and told him calmly but firmly, because you underestimated me. You don't get to destroy my life. My words sliced through the tense silence that followed, a moment of pure, satisfying power as I imagined his expression contorting with rage on the other end. He tried to speak, but I cut him off, refusing to let him manipulate the conversation. I reminded him that I knew about the forgery, the hotel stays, and every lie he'd spun to trap me. Each word I spoke felt like a hammer driving the truth deeper into the cracks of his crumbling mask. He sputtered excuses, but I stayed calm, letting him hear the icy resolve in my voice. His attempts to intimidate me fell flat, his bluster exposed for the desperate flailing of a coward caught in his own web. When he realized I wouldn't be swayed, his voice shifted to frantic threats, but they only confirmed how terrified he was of losing control. I ended the call with a quiet, lethal promise: "You won't win." The click of the call ending felt like a door slamming shut on the last shred of his hold over me. Moments after I hung up, my phone buzzed again with message after message from him, each more desperate and unhinged than the last. The carefully crafted mask he had worn for years shattered completely as he accused me of ruining his life, calling me selfish and heartless for defending what was mine. His words grew crueler with every text, his insults revealing the true depth of his bitterness and cowardice. Each notification felt like a slap, but instead of wounding me, they fueled a calm, icy rage that strengthened my resolve. The man who once pretended to love me was now fully unmasked, his desperation seeping through every hateful word he sent. I read each message carefully, screenshotting them as fresh evidence of his instability and malice. By the end, my phone was filled with a damning record of his unraveling, a digital diary of the real man behind the charming facade. The fear he hoped to inspire had the opposite effect, hardening my resolve to see this fight through to the bitter end. I blocked his number, relishing the finality of cutting him off completely, his tirades reduced to empty screams in the void. I sat in the quiet house, the silence now comforting instead of suffocating, and let myself breathe deeply for the first time all day. His power over me was gone, shattered along with his carefully maintained lies. Sitting alone in the quiet of my living room, I felt the storm of the past days begin to settle, and with it came a sudden, almost shocking clarity. I saw the years of manipulation for what they were, the constant undermining of my confidence, the subtle insults disguised as jokes, all tactics to keep me doubting myself. For the first time, I truly understood how much of my strength he had tried to sap to make himself feel powerful. But as the weight of his absence sank in, it was clear he had miscalculated. I was not weaker without him, I was stronger than I had ever been. Every breath felt freer, every thought sharper, as if the fog he'd wrapped around me had finally lifted. I realized I had always been the one who kept our life together, the one who sacrificed and worked for our dreams, not him. I walked from room to room, reclaiming each space as mine, seeing them not as scenes of our shared past but as places of my future. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked different now, eyes fierce, posture tall, a woman rising from the ashes of betrayal with unbreakable resolve. I whispered to myself that I was done letting fear rule me, done letting his lies define my worth. I gathered every reminder of him, a shirt left on the chair, a mug with his favorite team's logo, and tossed them into a box destined for the trash. Each item thrown away felt like another chain snapping off my heart. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was taking back every piece of myself he tried to steal. As dusk settled over the neighborhood, I reached out to my closest friends with trembling hands, unsure if they would believe the chaos that had overtaken my life. Within an hour, they were knocking on my door, arms full of food, blankets, and fierce hugs that made tears spring to my eyes. The warmth of their presence filled the cold void he left behind, laughter beginning to bubble through the cracks of my broken heart. We sat around my kitchen table late into the night, sharing memories, venting anger, and reminding me that I was never truly alone. Each friend took turns telling me how strong they knew I was, how proud they were that I had fought back so bravely. Their words felt like a balm on wounds I thought would never heal. I watched them move through my house, their kindness turning it from a battlefield into a haven, and I realized what love really looked like: honest, unwavering, and without hidden agendas. The air felt lighter with every joke and every moment of shared silence, the oppressive weight of betrayal slowly replaced by the comforting certainty of true friendship. We made plans for the coming days, promising to stand by each other no matter what, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I looked to the future without fear. When the last friend left, they squeezed my hand and told me I was never alone. As I locked the door behind them, I felt stronger than I ever thought possible. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, and instead of dread, I felt a resolute calm as I reached for my phone to call my lawyer. My voice was steady as I told him I wanted to move forward with filing for divorce immediately. There was nothing left to save in a marriage built on lies. He responded with swift professionalism, guiding me through the paperwork with the same urgency and dedication he had shown since the first desperate call. Signing those documents felt surreal, each stroke of the pen severing the ties that had bound me to someone who only sought to destroy me. The word divorce no longer carried the sting of failure, it felt like liberation. After everything he had done, lying, forging documents, selling our home behind my back, and betraying me with another woman, there was no room for forgiveness or reconciliation. I mailed the signed papers with a sense of finality that settled deep in my bones, the rustle of the envelope sliding into the mailbox sounding like a door slamming shut on that chapter of my life. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the warm morning air and letting the reality sink in. I was finally free from him. The knowledge gave me strength as I turned back toward my house, determined to rebuild a life defined not by his betrayal but by my own resilience. This was only the beginning of my true story. With the divorce proceedings underway, I met with my lawyer in his office, spreading out the mountain of evidence I had gathered over those frantic days. Together, we organized every forged document, suspicious bank transfer, and the damning text messages he had sent in his rage. My lawyer's eyes grew wider with each piece of proof I handed him, the case against my husband becoming stronger than either of us had hoped. He assured me that in court, the judge would see the full scope of his deceit and hold him accountable for every crime he committed. Knowing the truth was finally being assembled into an undeniable case gave me a sense of power I had never felt before. My husband thought he could spin a web of lies so tangled I'd never escape, but now I was the one unraveling it thread by thread. We discussed the best strategy to present everything in court, focusing on how to prove both his forgery and infidelity beyond any doubt. My lawyer pointed out that the combination of financial betrayal and adultery would paint a clear picture of his malicious intent, ensuring he wouldn't walk away unscathed. I sat in that office, the weight of the past weeks pressing on me but no longer crushing me, because I finally saw the path to justice. Every plan we made felt like another shield between me and the man who tried to ruin me. As I left his office with the case file tucked securely under my arm, I looked up at the bright afternoon sky and promised myself I would see this through to the very end. That evening, alone in my living room, I decided it was time to reclaim my voice not just in court but in every part of my life. I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and crafted a simple but powerful message on social media: "Thank you for leaving. I didn't know how strong I was until you showed me who you really are." My hands trembled as I hit post, the words appearing like a declaration of freedom broadcast to the world. Within minutes, comments and messages began pouring in from friends, family, and even acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years, all offering support and admiration for my courage. The overwhelming outpouring of love and solidarity filled me with a warmth I had almost forgotten existed. I spent hours reading messages that told me I had inspired others to stand up for themselves, that I wasn't alone, and that my story mattered. Every comment chipped away at the lingering shame and fear he had tried to plant in me, replacing it with strength and pride. I realized that by sharing the truth, I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was giving voice to countless others trapped in their own private nightmares. The notifications kept coming late into the night, and each new message made me feel less like a victim and more like a warrior. By the time I finally closed my laptop, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would never let anyone silence me again. Days after my post went viral, word reached his mistress, who had no idea she was just another pawn in his elaborate lies. She contacted me in a fury, demanding to know the truth, and when I calmly shared the evidence of his betrayal, I heard her sobs break through the phone. She told me she had thrown all his things into the street, refusing to see him ever again, and her words felt like poetic justice. I pictured him arriving at her apartment, only to find his clothes scattered in the dirt, his belongings exposed to neighbors who watched his humiliation unfold. The image brought a fierce satisfaction I hadn't dared to imagine during my darkest days. His double life was disintegrating before his eyes, every lie unraveling faster than he could patch it. Friends and co-workers of his who saw my social media post began confronting him, questioning the persona he had worked so hard to build. He tried desperately to spin new stories, but the evidence was irrefutable, his reputation crumbling under the weight of his own deceit. Rumors spread quickly, and soon he was left isolated, no allies to comfort him, only the consequences of his own actions. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he looked disheveled, angry, and lost, a man cornered by the truth he thought he could outrun. Knowing he was finally facing the fallout of his choices felt like the final piece of justice falling into place. I realized his world would never be the same, and neither would mine, but mine was finally on my terms. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with my head held high, my lawyer at my side, and a thick folder of evidence clutched in my hands like a sword. Across the courtroom, I saw him for the first time since everything unraveled, and he looked nothing like the confident man I once knew. His hair was unkempt, his suit wrinkled, and his eyes darted nervously as he avoided my gaze. The judge entered, and the room fell silent, every person aware of the tension crackling like a storm waiting to break. My lawyer presented our case meticulously, each document, message, and witness testimony building a fortress of facts he couldn't hope to tear down. His attorney tried to object and spin stories, but the truth shone through every lie, undeniable and damning. As I watched him squirm under questioning, my heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilaration, knowing that years of manipulation and betrayal were finally being exposed in a room where his charm held no power. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall and told the judge exactly what he had done, my voice steady even as my hands trembled slightly. I described the forged documents, the hidden suitcase, the affair, and the stolen money, each word stripping away the last of his false image. The courtroom felt like a sacred place where the truth reigned supreme, and for the first time, I truly believed that justice was possible. As I stepped back from the witness stand, I caught his eyes and saw a flicker of fear that told me he knew he had lost. After hours of testimony, questions, and tense silences, the judge called for a short recess before returning to deliver the verdict. I sat in the courtroom, my heart in my throat, surrounded by friends who had come to support me, their quiet presence a source of strength I clung to with every breath. When the judge finally reappeared, the room fell deathly still, each word she spoke echoing like a bell tolling in a cathedral. She ruled decisively in my favor. The sale of the house was nullified, full ownership restored to me, and my ex-husband was ordered to pay damages for his fraud and betrayal. A restraining order was issued, forbidding him from contacting me directly or indirectly, cutting him off completely from the life he once shared with me. The gavel struck the block with a sharp crack that reverberated through my bones, signaling the end of his illusions and the beginning of my freedom. My lawyer squeezed my shoulder with quiet pride, and I allowed the first tears of relief to slip down my cheeks, the courtroom blurring as the weight I had carried for so long finally lifted. He slumped in his seat, pale and defeated, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for someone to save him, but there was no one left. As I left the courthouse, I felt the world open before me like a sunrise after a stormy night. I was no longer defined by his betrayal, I was defined by the strength it took to stand up and reclaim my life. Returning home after the verdict felt surreal, like stepping into a place both familiar and entirely new, the walls of my house no longer haunted by his presence but echoing with the promise of a fresh start. I walked through each room slowly, planning how I would transform the spaces into reflections of my own taste and joy, rather than reminders of compromises made to please him. The next day, I began redecorating with a fierce, determined energy, painting the living room a bright, hopeful color and replacing old furniture with pieces that made me smile. Each choice felt like an act of defiance and healing, a declaration that my home belonged only to me now. Friends came to help, their laughter filling the rooms as we moved boxes, hung pictures, and shared stories of hope. Every pillow fluffed, every new curtain hung felt like a celebration of the fact that I had survived and refused to let his actions define me. I planted flowers in the garden, imagining their blooms as symbols of my own growth and resilience. Each morning, I woke up to a space that reflected not the shadows of my past but the light of the future I was creating with my own hands. The house was no longer a prison of memories but a sanctuary of peace, each corner echoing with the quiet strength I had fought so hard to reclaim. I promised myself that this home would always remind me of how far I had come, and how far I still intended to go. As the days turned into weeks, I searched for new ways to channel the rage and hurt into something that could empower me rather than consume me. That's when I signed up for boxing classes at a small gym near my house, stepping into the ring with a nervous excitement I hadn't felt in years. The first time I wrapped my hands and felt the weight of the gloves, I realized I was no longer the fragile woman who had once cried in the kitchen over his note. With every punch thrown, I imagined breaking through the barriers he had built around my confidence, each jab and hook helping me reclaim parts of myself I thought were lost forever. The sweat and bruises felt like badges of honor, proof that I was alive, fighting, and stronger than I ever believed possible. My coach praised my determination, telling me he saw a fire in my eyes that inspired everyone around me. I began to notice how my posture changed outside the gym, my shoulders squared, my head held high as I walked into meetings or simply down the street. Friends commented on how different I seemed, more grounded and sure of myself, no longer second-guessing every decision or shrinking from confrontation. Boxing taught me more than how to throw a punch, it taught me to trust my instincts, to stand tall even when facing something that once terrified me. Each class left me exhausted but exhilarated, my muscles aching in the best way possible, a reminder of the strength I was building inside and out. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving, reshaping my identity with every drop of sweat. And for the first time, I truly believed I deserved the life I was fighting for. The fierce determination I discovered in the ring began to spill into every part of my life, especially my career, which had once been overshadowed by the chaos of my marriage. At work, I took on projects I would have hesitated to volunteer for before, speaking up with ideas and leading meetings with a confidence that surprised even me. My colleagues noticed the shift, their respect growing as they saw me handle challenges with a cool, focused energy that commanded the room. I stayed late not out of fear of going home but because I was genuinely excited about what I was building for myself, driven by goals that were mine alone. Promotions came quickly, each new responsibility a testament to the power I had reclaimed from the ashes of my old life. I no longer felt the need to apologize for my ambition or hide my success to keep someone else comfortable. Instead, I celebrated every achievement, large or small, allowing myself to feel pride without guilt for the first time in years. I invested in professional development courses, traveled for conferences, and expanded my network, each step opening doors I once thought were closed to me forever. My coworkers began to seek me out for advice, my boss trusted me with high-stakes negotiations, and clients responded to my passion with enthusiasm and loyalty. The spark I had always carried inside me, the one he tried to snuff out, burned brighter than ever, lighting a path to a future that was entirely my own. I realized that in losing him, I had gained myself, and in gaining myself, I had unlocked a power I never knew existed. Months passed, and life began to settle into a rhythm that felt peaceful and empowering, the chaos of betrayal replaced with the steady beat of routines I chose for myself. One evening, while attending a charity gala through work, I met someone who caught my eye with a smile that felt genuine, warm, and entirely free of judgment. We spoke for hours, the conversation flowing easily as we shared stories of our pasts, our dreams, and the lessons we had learned through heartbreak. He listened without trying to fix me, his presence calm and reassuring, never pushing me to be anyone other than who I was in that moment. Each laugh we shared felt like a small miracle, proof that the pieces of my heart could come together again stronger than before. In the weeks that followed, we went on long walks through the city, cooked dinners together in my newly redecorated kitchen, and slowly peeled back the layers of fear and doubt that lingered in both of us. He admired my strength, respected my independence, and reminded me daily that love could be kind, patient, and healing. I didn't rush or lose myself the way I once had. Instead, I let our connection grow at a pace that felt safe and true. For the first time, I felt seen and accepted without conditions, as if everything I had endured had led me to this quiet, unexpected joy. I realized love didn't have to mean surrendering myself, it could mean finding someone who would stand beside me, not in front or behind, but as an equal partner on the path ahead. As the seasons changed and my life continued to bloom with new possibilities, word reached me that my ex-husband was living in a dingy apartment on the outskirts of town, his once proud demeanor reduced to angry, lonely bitterness. Mutual acquaintances described him as a man haunted by his own choices, unable to find stable work because his reputation had been shattered by the truth he worked so hard to hide. When he finally worked up the nerve to call, his number flashed across my phone screen like a ghost from a life I had already buried. I let it ring until it stopped, my heart steady and unshaken, no longer needing closure or apology from someone so unworthy of either. He left a desperate voicemail begging for a second chance, his words soaked in regret that came far too late. I listened to his message once, then calmly deleted it, feeling nothing but a quiet triumph. Knowing he was alone in the ruin he created was the sweetest revenge I could have asked for, not because I wanted him to suffer, but because it proved he could no longer control my life. Every night I slept peacefully in the home he failed to steal, every day I woke up to a future he could never touch. His downfall was not my doing but the result of his own arrogance and cruelty, and that was a justice more satisfying than any revenge I could have planned. I stopped checking for updates about him, realizing he was irrelevant to the life I had fought so hard to rebuild. Instead, I focused on the love, laughter, and possibilities that now filled my days. He was the past, and I was finally free to live fully in my present. One quiet evening, I sat at my desk with a steaming cup of tea and a soft lamp casting a warm glow over the pages of a new journal. I decided it was time to write a letter to the woman I had been, the woman who once felt small and powerless, who thought she couldn't survive alone. I poured out words of love and pride, reminding her that she had done the unthinkable, she had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and fear, and she had emerged stronger than she ever dreamed possible. I told her she deserved kindness, respect, and a life free from the shadows of someone else's lies. I thanked her for not giving up when the world seemed to collapse, for finding courage in the darkest hours, and for learning to trust herself again. Each sentence felt like a healing balm, a promise to never doubt my worth again. I signed the letter with a quiet sense of peace, folding it carefully and tucking it into the journal as a reminder I could return to whenever life tried to shake my resolve. In that moment, I felt a powerful connection to every version of myself, past, present, and future, each one stronger and wiser than the last. I knew the scars of betrayal would always be part of my story, but they no longer defined me, they were proof of survival, of resilience, of a heart that refused to break beyond repair. I whispered a final thank you to the woman I used to be, knowing she had carried me through every storm. I was no longer afraid of the past, because it had taught me exactly who I was meant to become. Every morning now begins with sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, warming my skin as I wake with a smile and a heart full of gratitude for the freedom I fought so hard to reclaim. My days are filled with purpose and joy, surrounded by friends who love me, work that inspires me, and a partner who respects and cherishes me for exactly who I am. I move through the world with a confidence that once seemed impossible, unafraid to speak my mind or take risks for the life I know I deserve. My home is a sanctuary of peace, laughter, and creativity, each room a testament to the strength I discovered in myself when everything else fell apart. I have learned to savor the quiet moments, to celebrate the smallest victories, and to trust that I can handle whatever the future brings. I no longer measure my worth by someone else's approval or stay silent to keep the peace. I know now that my voice is my greatest power. The day he walked out wasn't the end of my life, it was the beginning of the truest, most extraordinary chapter one could have imagined. Each sunrise feels like a second chance, a reminder that happiness built on self-respect is the most unshakable foundation of all. I carry my story proudly, not as a tale of tragedy, but as proof of resilience and triumph. My new beginning is here, and every day, I choose to live it fully, boldly, and without fear. The life he tried to steal has become the life I love beyond measure.